Century of Love is the theme for our 44th Annual Bishop Services Appeal. Please be generous. Thank you, and God bless you.
Lord, make me a means of your peace.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Catholics Today. I'm Blue Rolfes, Director of Communications for the Catholic Diocese of Lafayette. On Catholics Today, we talk about the community services and programs that reach out to Catholics throughout the Diocese of Acadiana. Today, our focus is on a very special and wonderful program called Mending the Soul. It began back in 2003 in Phoenix, Arizona, when a small group of people joined with community leaders to form, with God's grace, a global ministry that has now trained thousands of community and church leaders around the country and around the world. Mending the Soul helps adults deal and overcome with guilt, shame, dysfunction, and trauma stemming from childhood. Today, we are very excited to welcome a special guest to our studios here at Catholics Today, Shanell Bender, who comes to us all the way from Phoenix, Arizona. And Shanell, we understand that you are Program Director for the National Mending the Souls organization. Thank you so very much for being here with us. We're honored to have you.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Now, Shanell, for those of our viewers who are watching today and aren't familiar with the program Mending the Soul, what's it all about?
So Mending the Soul is a curriculum that combines really good psychology with sound theology for healing from abuse.
Okay. And tell us the story or the history of Mending the Soul. How did it get started? We know that it originated in 2003 in Phoenix, but what was the synthesis of it? How did it begin?
So Dr. Steve Tracy and Celestia, his wife, he was ministering there in, I think it was Tempe, Arizona, and she was a counselor there in the same area, and she continued to get referrals from churches, and it was just overwhelming as far as people in the church that had suffered from abuse, and it was harming their marriages, and so all along their hearts were very much tender and bleeding for the realization of how many people were going through harm and hurt, and it was continuing on in their lives, past when it happened, but on in their lives. And so there was one night when she got a call from a church, and there was a missionary family coming back off of the field with 3 little girls that had been sexually molested by a coworker. And the church, they're bringing them back off at the field, and the church was asking her that they had raised a little bit of money. Could she basically heal them? And it just broke her heart that amount of money would barely get them a few sessions. And just the realization that how prohibitive it is at times for people to get to the counselor or get to, whether it's financially or possibly location-wise, and that there's just not enough time on the docket for the need. And so from that heart, that night, her and Dr. Steve went on a walk, and she told him he had to tell her yes before she asked him what to do. But from that, she asked him, could you please write a book that addressed trauma and addressed God's view of trauma from the Bible? And so that's where Mending the Soul originated.
That's how it all began.
Yeah, all began.
And it truly fills such a unique need that can't be met by any other organization. Who would be most helped by the many services offered by Mending the Soul? Well,
I truly believe anybody who has lived any amount of years in this broken world that we know it to be. I read a statistic the other day that 70% of adults have suffered some kind of traumatic event. So when you consider that, then 70% of the people walking around today could be helped by going through a Mending the Soul group.
So just about all of us when you stop and think about it. Exactly. Now, how will a person know if a particular Mending the Soul group is the right fit for them, the right bond?
Okay, so when they're setting groups up, they're gender specific. So women groups meet with women, men groups meet with men, and that is the entirety of the group. So that includes the facilitators are gender. So if it's a man facilitator with a men's group, a women's facilitator with a women's group. That really helps in setting up basically a safe environment to be able to talk about intimate details of your life and process through them. As far as knowing a particular group, we train the facilitators to do intakes. And in those intakes, they go through specific questions to find out the readiness of the person coming into the group. Because there would be times when maybe it wasn't safe for somebody to be part of a group. Maybe they need some additional time, maybe seeing a professional counselor to get to a place of safety before they enter into a group. So that process is really done through that intake process. And that's not only for the facilitator, but that also is for the participant finding out if that's the right group for them.
It sounds like the Mending the Soul facilitators work very hard to protect the already fragile people who are coming into their atmosphere.
Exactly. That's our huge main goal, is for it to be safe groups for the facilitators and for the participants.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Now, tell us, where do Mending the Soul support groups meet, and approximately how long, what's the time commitment? How long does each meeting last?
So we have Mending the Soul groups all over the United States. We also have presence internationally.
That's exciting.
Our groups meet in communities. So it could be churches. I know of facilitators that have done groups in Starbucks. I know of facilitators who have met people in McDonald's and sat while their children were playing on the playground. They worked through Mending the Soul with that person. So we are all over the place. Our motto is as much as possible to go to where the people are. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Now, how would we start this ministry? Of course, we do have a very active and wonderful, absolutely wonderful Mending the Soul chapter here in our diocese. But for others who are viewing from other areas of Louisiana or else from around the country, how do they go about starting this ministry in their church or even in their organization?
So I think the best way is to identify several people that are interested in becoming trained. Our process then of becoming a facilitator is you first do your own work. So it's finding a group that you go through as a participant and you do your own work. Then we now have our training online. So pretty much every month there is a 4-week training that you would then sign up and you would go through that training. And that training goes through the theology of abuse. It goes through all the specifics of setting up a group, how to do that, how to do it safely, things to consider. All of that is vetted out in that training. And then you would find a place where you could co-facilitate with somebody who has already facilitated. That way, again, kind of just layering out that safety that I've done my own work. I have gone through training to know how to do this, and now I'm going to start getting my feet wet with being a co-facilitator. And then once that process has happened, then going and becoming a facilitator and starting groups.
It sounds like an incredibly comprehensive training period.
Right.
That's wonderful to know. Now, how many people are in a particular group? And I was going to ask if adult groups can be co-ed, but you've already stressed that they're gender specific,
Right.
which is terrific. But about how large do you like to have the groups be, or how small for that matter?
No more than 5 or 6 in a group. And that would include 2 facilitators. So you're looking at around 3 or 4 participants. And then we've also had times where we've done it one-on-one. So we have groups where maybe there's somebody who's just not able to get into a group or not able to get there, where they are able to do it one-on-one with a facilitator. So those are kind of the dynamics. But really keeping the group small, because we typically meet 2 hours a week, and you really want to have enough time for everybody to be able to process.
So a participant would never feel lost in
Right.
the process, because it's so much almost one-on-one, and in some cases
Right.
one-on-one attention.
Right.
Now, you mentioned that it's 2 hours a week. How many weeks would that process take in a typical Mending the Soul group?
So anywhere from 12 to 20 weeks. That really depends on the facilitator and how they want to process through the group. But you would not want to do any less than 12. In the book, there is 10 chapters, and you want to make sure that you have at least weeks per chapter. And many of the chapters, you're actually better off to do 2 weeks with several of those chapters. So that's why the 12 weeks. But it can go up to 20 weeks if a facilitator is just wanting to take, it's a good group, they just want to take more time, then that's also possible.
Can it go beyond 20 weeks if the group feels like they're really making progress with each other and they're comfortable with each other?
It could. We would really like, for the participant's sake and the facilitator's sake, that is decided before the group starts.
I see. Yeah.
Because we don't want somebody not being able to go past the 20 weeks, so somebody has to drop out and then the group is still going on. This is really a process of starting together and ending together. And this is really a process of, most of the time when we have been hurt and we've had trauma, it's been in community. So whether it's community of our family or it's community at school or our neighbors, that's where harm happens. And so really this is about creating healthy, safe community for us to heal in. So we're just taking, so we hurt in community, we heal in community.
Now, what happens once that time period is over and the group has come to an end after 20 weeks or maybe after an earlier time period? Where does a participant go from there?
So many times the facilitators stay in contact. I know of lots of groups where they'll meet periodically, like every 3 months afterwards, to touch base with one another. If they want to continue on with another Bible study together, that's entirely possible. It's really up to the facilitator and that group. A lot of times too, that's a time and a period of healing, and then people have their lives begin to unfold in incredible ways, and so they're not available, to continue in that group, and you may be staying in touch more by phone or text, and
But it's nice to know that extended support is there, because I can imagine that when Mending the Soul group ends, there's a bond, a lifelong bond that group would share.
Right, and Mending the Soul also follows up. Participants get their completion certificate from us, and then we follow up with additional emails and contact points, again, to just continue to let them know that they're a part of a caring community.
Now, how would a person who's watching, who maybe feels like, I think Mending the Soul is the perfect opportunity for me to finally deal with horrible things that have happened during my childhood. How do they go about seeking out a group? How do they first reach out for help?
On our website, which is mendingthesoul.org, you can go on, and in the little search bar it has Find a Group. And so you actually put that in, and you're going to hit on that tab and put your zip code in. And that's going to give you groups in your area.
Okay. Now, what if there are no groups available? Say if a person maybe lives in a rural area, or maybe an area where there aren't any groups already set up. Is there help available for them as well?
Yes, we actually have facilitators who are willing to Skype. So in the same place when you're doing Find a Group, if you're not able to find a group, then you can contact facilitators and look at doing that across Skype. That is the way that we've grown tremendously. So we have facilitators, people in areas where they weren't able to find a group, they facilitated with somebody across Skype, and then eventually begin to start groups in their area. So it's a great way to grow.
And it's a nice combination of such a wonderful human connection, but turning to technology to make it happen for those that aren't close to a nearby group. Now, do all individuals within our church need to be trained for this type of work? How do you feel about that?
Well, I feel like that life throws us curveballs all the time, and the more trauma-informed that we are, the more educated that we are, the better able we are to walk with our neighbors, the better able we are to walk with our children, with our spouses. So ideally, yes, I believe that everybody should have further knowledge on trauma and how it affects us and what the symptoms are, and how to healthfully, because so many of the times when a victim comes forward, they're re-victimized over and over again by the comments, and not on purpose. Nobody's intentionally trying to hurt somebody. It's done unintentionally, but it still causes them further harm. So absolutely, we will be a better world as we become better informed about trauma and how to walk with people healthfully to being safe and feeling better.
And I bet that fear of re-victimization leads to a reluctance on the part of a lot of victims to come forward and to seek that help. It's a really courageous step for people to seek help, to reach outside their comfort zone and say, I need help.
It's really pretty huge when someone comes forward, quite frankly. The shame that we carry from being abused, I know it's so ironic because you would think the abuser is the one that should feel the shame, but that's not typically what happens. What happens is the victim feels the shame. The victim feels like I did something wrong. So I must have done something because, it's my fault, in other words. And so anytime they come forward, it's huge. They're a hero. They are, to begin to disclose, takes so much courage.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's nice to know that y'all are there to be there for them when they do finally get the courage to reach out.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Now, what do we do if we don't have trained facilitators at our church? For example, the Diocese of Lafayette is trying to move forward and to help with this movement and with the Mending the Soul groups. What if we don't have trained facilitators within our particular area to train us? Is there another place that we can turn to for help?
Again, I would contact us through our mendingthesoul.org, through the website, and I am always available. That's what I do as far as making connections between facilitators like the facilitators that are here in Lafayette with people who want to become facilitators, maybe in New Orleans, the Diocese of New Orleans, making those connections so that they can start those steps of going through the group for themselves, then doing the training online, and then beginning that co-facilitation process.
Okay. Now, tell us exactly what is a lay facilitator? Is that different from a normal facilitator? And how do I become a Mending the Soul facilitator?
Okay. So a lay facilitator, that's just talking about it's somebody that's not a counselor.
I see.
So we have counselors, we have professional counselors that use Mending the Soul curriculum in their practice. But when we say lay facilitator, we're talking about somebody who doesn't have a psychology background, doesn't have a degree, is not licensed as a counselor with the state. They're a lay person who many times are a survivor themselves and have experienced somebody walking with them to healing, and now they really want to give back and do the same.
And that would probably be an ideal facilitator, is somebody who's been there.
Right.
Because nobody else can truly understand what a participant or what a person who's been victimized is going through, other than somebody who's already walked the walk, I would think.
Exactly. Well, and our facilitators, the beauty of Mending the Soul is that we don't ever ask our participants to do something that we are not actively doing ourselves. So as our participants share their stories, we are sharing our story. And you're just building that layer and layers of trust that it is okay to expose all of those secrets that have been holding me captive. I can let them go. This is a safe place to say what's happened to me. This is a safe place. And how I know it's safe is because my facilitator is actively exempling telling her story.
Exactly.
Not holding secrets back.
And I can imagine that the facilitators are a great source of inspiration for the participants who say, look how far she's come. She's really come so far toward healing. I can do that too, because she can help me. Now, in your own words, Shanell, what has Mending the Soul meant for you personally, and can you share how one can be healed through Mending the Soul?
I can. So I was a mom and 4 beautiful children. And I was married for 16 years, so I thought was a great guy. And when my oldest daughter was 15 years old, she was able to disclose sexual abuse. So pretty much through a little bit of process of time, but overnight I became a single mom with 4 children, and 2 of them having been abused, sexually abused. And I remember thinking, it was like, oh my goodness, it's hard enough being a parent, but now realizing that I am a parent of children who have experienced something that they should never have experienced. And walking the streets at night and crying out to God that I wanted my children to be healed. And I didn't want us to just exist. I wanted healing, because it's not right. This should not have happened. I had no idea how to heal, though. I had no idea. That wasn't taught. There wasn't, and I love God. I love God from the time I was a little tiny girl. I loved God, and I lived for Him, and I communed and had relationship with Him. But it was never taught how to heal and what did that look like. And I will never forget a beautiful facilitator. Her name is Linda Renzel, that heard enough of my story. She came to me and said, "Shanell, I really think you would benefit from going through Mending the Soul." And I want to state, I had been seeing a counselor. I knew enough to get us counseling, but I didn't know the right questions to help myself. So I was like, okay, yes, I want to do that. I want to do this. And I started that group, and oh my word, when I walked out 12 weeks later, I wasn't the same person. There was a freedom to be and begin to be the mom that I was always destined to be the person that I was destined to be, to know how to have a process and an understanding of what that trauma had laid on me, the heavy burden it had laid on me, and how I could begin to let that go, begin to get rid of that in a healthy and a right way, in a way of that process of really looking at the damage that had been done, grieving it, and letting it go. And that's what Mending the Soul did for me. I mean, it's amazing when I look at myself and my children now and what God has done. The best thing I ever did for my children was heal myself. Because when I did that, they followed suit.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. Speaking of courage, we've talked about the courage of victims coming forward. I know it must take a great deal of courage for you to share your story, and believe me, you're touching many hearts out there, most definitely, and inspiring many. I'd like to go back once again to the facilitator role again, because it seems to be just such a key element in Mending the Soul. And can you talk a little more about the relationship that you had with your facilitator that led to your own personal healing, and then you in turn helping your family walk toward healing?
Yes, so the facilitator is such a unique role because it's not about giving advice. It's not about telling somebody what to do. It's not about, I know this, so here, let me tell you what to do. And by the way, if you do these steps, 1, 2, 3, you're going to get what you need. No, it is literally about linking arms and walking with that person and knowing that God and the Holy Spirit, that's the healers. That's where our healing comes from. We're just walking together through that process. We're just giving each other support and that unconditional love and that safe place to say whatever we need to say without filters, without having to worry, but just like get that from the inside to the outside. And that's the healing that happens. I talk to my kids all of the time, now knowing what I know and the process that I know, that we can walk around sometimes having a smile on our face and the smile doesn't match what's actually on the inside. We want to live life with the inside matching the outside. That authentic knowing that God has healed us, that we are continuing to be healed, that He is a light in our life, that He will shine, that there is hope. That before Mending the Soul, there was times it felt so hopeless. It's not. That's the beauty with Mending the Soul too, is the fact that as you're going through that and you're facing that ugliness, which is hard and painful, at the same time, it's telling you who God says you are, how much He loves you, what He has for you. And that's that part of what that facilitator is doing, is just presenting God as a healer and as a light in their life.
It's wonderful to hear that the ministry is so faith-based, and that God is at the center of that healing. And we use the word healing, but Shanell, that's a lifelong process. Absolutely. I would think, isn't it?
It is. I do believe that as we are willing and we are able, there is times in our life. So during that Mending the Soul time, that 12 weeks, there was a huge amount of healing that happened in my life, and it was like boom, boom, boom. As far as it was just like everything fell into place and the pieces of the puzzle, and being able to really look at what had happened to me. But healing has continued every year as I continue to walk with others, and I believe that's when the Bible says what was meant for evil, God took and made it good. I believe that's what our facilitators are doing. What was meant for evil, what was meant to destroy their lives, they themselves have healed and are healing, and now they are linking arms with others to do the same.
It's wonderful to know.
I know, and it just like spreads. Because that's what we want. That's what we
exactly.
want. We want people to live and be who they were intended to be.
Tell us a little bit in your role as program director. What are some of the other programs that Mending the Soul is spreading out to include now?
So we have a Princess Lost. Princess Lost is a curriculum that is specific for sex traffic or complex trauma victims. And it is a beautiful curriculum that walks women or men who have suffered that complex trauma, repeated years of trauma, walks them through their story in just a beautiful and a very gentle way. And then we also have, coming out in November, we have Vulnerable Child. So excited about Vulnerable Child. But all of our curriculums are wonderful. Vulnerable Child is actually for the family. So Vulnerable Child is, when you're running it, you are working with the parents and the children at the same time, and beginning to help educate the parents on trauma and trauma effects, and then helping them to then connect with their children in ways that is beneficial and life-giving. Yes.
And with your personal story, you'd be the ideal person to be in charge of that. Well, that's definitely great to hear.
Good.
Well, it's been an incredible honor to have you with us here. I know we're all excited to have you in Lafayette. You're here for the National Family Life Ministers Conference, and we're so thrilled to have you. And I know that you'll bring your healing and your faith and your inspiration to so many people. So we're absolutely thrilled to have you. Is there anything else that you'd like to leave our viewers with?
Oh, I'm just honored to be here. I'm honored to be here. I'm honored to serve these courageous people that are moving forward in their communities to bring about healing. It's amazing. It touches my heart and soul in such great depth because when a person heals, just to watch the light come back into their eye and the zest and the kick in their feet. It's like, yes, and really living this precious, beautiful life that God has given us. So I wish it for everyone. I bless all of those that are hearing this program, that they find a place and a way to have healing in their life.
And we are blessed to have you in our presence.
Thank you.
Thank you. We've been speaking with Shanell Bender of Phoenix, Arizona, Program Director for the National Mending the Soul Conference, for the National Mending the Soul organization. Thanks so much for being with us. We'll see you on the next edition of Catholics Today. I'm Blue Rolfes.